Good evening. I will call to order the 25th meeting of the Planning Board fiscal year 2018. I am Cheryl Tagayas, the chair of the committee.
Denny Swenson, member.
The board, I
Rich
should say.
Beeler, member.
Julia Getman, clerk.
William Clark, Planning Director.
Lauren Masser, assistant town planner.
April Lamoureux, member.
Okay, so our agenda for this evening does not include any public hearings. So we will have one opportunity for members of the public or the audience to speak, and that will be under citizen speak. Before we get to that, we do have a few administrative items. Our next meeting dates are June 7th and June 21st, which is a little bit of a switch because we're normally the second and the fourth Thursday, and we are the first and third for June. Next, we have a lot of meeting minutes, I think 6 sets at least. So have members had the opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
And you have some,
I just have one tweak, and it's to the March 8th. It was the Pulte Farm update.
okay? So,
You
is
could
Mr.
keep- you
is
could
Mr.
keep-
Mulligan still on the property?
No, I think the property has changed hands.
Okay. Okay, you want to have others take a look?
Sure. Oh, you weren't here yet, so I'll get it. You don't even need to worry.
Oh, that's right.
It was March.
It's the pink, right?
Yes. It was March 8th.
Okay, those are the March 8th.
And I went back and looked at the November meeting. And the March meeting.
Works.
Okay.
Okay, any other proposed amendments? So Julie, can you just read off which we have? Which
We need to approve?
Yes.
Yeah, March 8th was the first, March 15th, April 12th sidewalk, the April 12th regular meeting needs to be adjusted, and April 26th and May 10th.
Ryan, you may have been off the phone at that point of the meeting. It was March 8th.
Yeah,
You may or may not.
that's a good point. On March 8th, we probably should reference that I got off the phone at 10 p.m.
It was around then.
It was
so-
exactly at 10 p.m. I checked.
You were like, "Dick."
Yeah. That's the rule.
Denny's
I
talking
didn't hear a
about
motion.
It says 9:50. 9:50.
Okay, great. All right, I was early. Fine.
Well, I was still talking about trees, you know me.
Okay, so it is in here. Great, thanks.
Okay, so you said March 8th and,
March 15th, April 12th sidewalk, don't look at
Right.
the April 12th actual minutes.
So-
April 26th and May 10th.
and so you said we're not doing the 12th, the actual meeting?
Right.
Okay.
Lauren can explain that.
All right. And on May 10th, the item 5, the term curfew, I'd just like to say end time or some other words besides curfew. Extend past the 10 p.m. What do you guys think besides the word curfew?
Curfew. Haven't had a curfew for so long.
I kind of feel like Cinderella when you say curfew. I'm looking on definition, like I'm just trying to look for a thesaurus at the moment.
probably the right word, to be honest with you.
the right word?
Actually is the
Okay.
right
It's the
word.
right word.
Okay, fine then. All right, so if folks are ready, I think we could have a motion to approve as amended as a block, except for the April 12th actual meeting, right?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ah,
And if you send Brian's version to Julia, then she'll have the.
Actually, we need to do that differently because Rich
Just
can
separate
vote on the minutes. So we need to do the
last two.
the March 8th and 15th and the April 12th as a block, right? And then the April 26th and the May 10th together, right? So
It
April,
looks also, I'm sorry, it looks like February 22nd hasn't been approved either.
okay. I know that I reviewed them all.
I did too.
February
22nd.
22nd.
So do you need a motion to approve the minutes from February 22nd?
So I think we need to redo the motion to split them. So it would be February 22nd, March 8th, March 15th, and the April 12th site walk first.
So
as a
moved.
group.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next motion then would be for the April 26th and the May 10th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, got that done.
That's the one tweak.
I think since we have folks here, we will do the signing of the documents at the end of the meeting, okay? So that brings us to citizens speak. So is there anyone who would like to come forward?
Very quick.
Okay,
Ned Corcoran. This morning, I got a text from Martha Burke. You remember last year, we approved a clustered subdivision, to preserve all of that wooded area in front, and there was discussion about some of the wildlife on the property, and she sent a text of a photo of a large owl that was in the wooded area that was preserved, and I thought I'd just give you a chance to see
Wow.
that there was a
wildlife.
somewhat of a wildlife benefit to
That's cool.
the action that you guys took.
So just for folks to recall, this is one of our first cluster applications where cluster the lots together closer and it allows preservation of, wow, that's beautiful, of more natural areas left alone, right? So
That's right,
great.
35% of the lot area was left to preservation. and
Opposed.
That property was put into a conservation trust
Yeah, right?
under the custody of the Conservation Commission. And Judith Kemp, who's a member of that commission who testified at the hearing, testified about, in particular, the owls that live in the woods. And this is one of the owls,
Great.
so I thought you'd like to see
Sure.
that.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, come on up.
Hello, my name is Carol Stalker. I live at 291 Hillside Street. I want to report on progress on replanting the 4,000 square feet of town land that contractor developer John P. Connolly illegally cut down along the scenic byway on Hillside Street. The trees have arrived. There is progress being made. Just to review, Mr. Keneally cut these trees in December, when Mr. Clark was told, he was asked about how far the setback was. He said it was about 5 feet. This was soon after, months went by. In March, my husband, Robert Muzzy, and I looked at the DPW GIF map, and we said, oh my goodness, that's not 5 feet, that's 25 feet, counting from the macadam. And we went literally out there with our tape measures, and we measured it. And this was in March, and we contacted the planning board and said, we think there's been a big mistake here that nobody has spotted until now. And that's when this all started. So we appeared before the planning board. The planning board asked the Shade Tree Advisory Committee to meet with Mr. Connolly and his landscape architect and make a recommendation, which it did. And then on April 12th, the planning board followed that recommendations that the the Shade Tree Advisory Committee made. We met with Mr. Connolly, and our recommendation was to ask him to plant 17 trees and 80 shrubs, with every 5 shrubs counting as a tree, so that the eyesore would fill in relatively quickly, because this is a scenic road. You also, as the planning board, asked that he should pay to irrigate these plants for 3 years and replace any that died during that period. You also asked that there be a surety bond to ensure that these things happen over that time period. Yesterday, I talked with the planning office, and I talked to Mr. Connolly's landscape designer, Nancy Latanzio, on site. She was the woman who appeared before you on April 12th and gave a very nice presentation. The plants are there. She wants to get them into the ground as soon as possible. I don't know if they're the proper caliber or size, which was supposed to be 2.5 to 3.5, because they're behind a chain link fence, so I don't have any access to them. But in, with the spirit of goodwill, I assume that they're the right size and the right number. And she also agreed that since the shrubs were counted as a fifth of each shrub was a fifth of a replacement tree, so she said they will also be irrigated, the shrubs, and also be replaced if they die, because they're a fraction of a tree for what we counted. So that's all really good. And now what's still up in the air is that we have not received an irrigation plan, and I do not think one has yet been decided on. Though Nancy wants to start irrigating as soon as possible. It's going to be 90 degrees the next couple of days, and lack of water is the number one killer of new trees, and we don't want to have to replace these trees and start over again. Nancy said that the hangup is that they apparently cannot connect to the town water line as she had proposed when she presented to you, and they have Mr. Connolly is now proposing to meter it from his new house that he's built, but he's proposing 3 meters, and the building department doesn't like that. So the town tree warden, ex officio, and the planning office and the DPW head, I'm told, as of yesterday, we're in negotiations, or we're going to talk about this and try to come up with a solution. And meanwhile, the Hillside Neighbors Association met and agreed that they will monitor tree watering and survival as requested by the planning board at that meeting, when Branch Lane, the tree warden, said he didn't want to go 3 years out on a project like that. That leaves the issue of the surety bond that Mr. Connolly was instructed to get. I guess my question is whether there has been any update or progress on the surety bond, and any report that you could share with us. Or are am I telling you things you don't already know?
Well, you raise issues for us on something that's not on our agenda.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to put it on our agenda for our next meeting. I'm sorry, we have to do it that way, but since it wasn't advertised, I think that's the proper way to do that.
Of
So
course.
we'll make a note of it, and we'll have it on the agenda on the June 7th.
And there may be more resolution by that time.
There may be, right?
Well, good, thank you very
Okay,
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your thorough update.
Well, we will keep you appraised.
Oh,
That's
good,
great, thank
good.
you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
As Joe comes to the table, this sort of relates to trees. At our last meeting, we talked about doing a tree bylaw. And I have reached out to Nancy Chisholm, and I'm hoping to get on their dance card and start talking about that.
Great.
Hi,
Hello.
thank you. I'm Joe Sloan. I live at 55 Concord Ave, and I have two items that I'd like you to give some consideration to tonight. First off, I know it's on your agenda to hear from April some conversation about possible progress on improving the situation at the corner where the Milton Food Mart is. And I would just generally say that that a lot of neighbors are very much in support of April's efforts. She's worked very hard up to now to do a lot of homework, a lot of research, a lot of conversation, a lot of listening, and a lot of consideration to the area and not just the site, which I think a lot of neighbors are very appreciative of, because it's, as you know, it's a very challenging intersection. The DCR did a lot of improvements there that helped the vehicle traffic, but there's definitely some things that could continue to be improved as it regards pedestrian and bicycle safety right there. And some of the physical structures that DCR put into place are already failing. There hasn't been a lot of upkeep there. So in general, a lot of details, a lot of things still need to be talked about. But again, in general, I think that I speak for a lot of folks who are, again, very supportive of this effort going forward. And a lot of residents have offered to participate in that process going forward, to help be a conduit for information from neighbors, and folks on the Parkway are very interested. So I think it really encompasses a lot of different aspects. But again, a vote of confidence for that, vote of support going forward. Secondly, something that you might remember I've spoken at town meeting about a couple of times has been support for more code enforcement in town, and we have a new code enforcement officer. We got a good report from Mike Dennehy at town meeting about that. And one thing in particular that I've been in constant conversation with inspectional services about over the past year or so has been the paving of front yards. Paving of front setbacks, and it was in fact in 2005 at town meeting that amendment was made to the bylaws that prohibited the paving of the front setback. Doesn't mean it hasn't stopped.
I'm sorry, Joe, what year was that again?
I have 2005, May 2005.
Okay, thank you.
It was amendment to sections 6 and 7. And this, just as an example, just last week, there's already been 3 of these happening this spring. Just last week, I was walking by this one as it was underway. It's on a section of Brush Hill Road where there was a pedestrian fatality, you might remember, just a couple of years ago. In fact, it's within walking distance of a new DCR pedestrian signal that's been put up and was knocked down by a car just a week ago. I talked to the building commissioner as this was underway. There are multiple violations there. The percentage of paved surface for the lot is excessive. That driveway actually extends into the neighbor's property. The owner, when I walked by, assured me that he had all the permits from the town of Milton and the DCR for this work. No permits from the town of Milton for any of that. So basically, the conversation here with inspectional services has been, we made this change in 2005, but there's lots of little loopholes. And the biggest one is that paving of the side setbacks is not addressed by that bylaw. And that's partly what the problem is with that illustration today, is that and Joe Prondak will tell you that this, he's frustrated by this on an ongoing basis, that he can't enforce any paving of the side setback because it's not covered by this bylaw. He would support an amendment to that. It needs a little bit more homework. The language in the bylaws when those amendments were made in 2005, the language it needs a little tightening up, so it's not just simply the insertion of a few words. So it needs a little bit of homework, but he would support an effort to tighten that up. I also brought to his attention, because it was brought to my attention by our son, who's a landscape architect and works a lot in Arlington and Belmont and that general area, that a lot of towns have a requirement that there's a driveway permit that needs to be issued. And just a quick internet search, Sudbury, Lexington, Watertown, Waltham, New Bedford, the list goes on of towns that require a driveway improvement permit. They call it different things in different towns. In many towns, it's not required if you're simply repaving and not changing the footprint of the paving, but at least half of the towns on the list require the permit even if you're just repaving. And that gives the town the opportunity to look at things like stormwater, that's everybody's talking about is the biggest issue. You know, a case like this on Brush Hill Road, there appears to have been the granting of a curb cut from the DCR, but no communication between the DCR and our building department as to whether this curb cut was granted for something that was legal within the town of Milton. So I've brought you copies of the town of Watertown's, just something for you to look at as an example. The inspectional services understands that it's one thing to make rules and have them on the books, but it's another thing to be able to educate people about this. And this is an educational effort that Watertown does to educate residents about driveways. And this might be something that we could do. You know, whether we make bylaw changes or not, we certainly have to let people know about this. The amount of paving that's happening, especially in areas where we have two-family houses, it's just nonstop, and it's really changing the character of these neighborhoods. Up to now, I've been thinking that my focus was on Precinct 1 and Precinct 10, but Joe Prondak said he had an example from Granite Avenue that just recently happened as well. So I'm sure that East Milton probably has some of these same issues. So we'll give that some consideration.
So would you like for the board to consider zoning amendment? Or is that something that you were thinking that you might pursue more as a citizen's petition type
Well,
thing?
I think it would be most efficient if it were a planning board initiative. And at this point, I know that there's community support for this because a number of residents have brought this to the attention of the building department. And Joe Prondak has explained what the limitations of enforcement have been. So he has explained that to me that his efforts would be stronger if we tightened up that bylaw. So I think it needs some review, and possibly we could give that some consideration for October.
Great, so we will put that on our list. Yes, Bill?
We have a driveway permit that you get from engineering. Since the driveway exits onto the street, it starts at engineering.
Okay.
We have a requirement for a permit for a new driveway, a reconfigured driveway, or an enlarged driveway. That needs sign off from planning, building, and engineering. We don't get them all, but the ones that we do, we look at every one that we get. That one I did not see, so they didn't get a permit. I know that.
Sorry, Bill, so and there's supposed to be an application filed with engineering and then they send it over to you?
There's a $75 fee with the driveway permit
Okay.
at engineering, and they follow it through. I did talk to Joe Prondak yesterday, and his comment was, he was talking about, we have a bylaw requirement of no more than 30% of the front yard setback. What that doesn't take into account is a side yard that you can access from a side street. If your frontage is on one street and you're on a corner, that second frontage that you would have is not your frontage, that's your side yard, and we do not have zoning that limits or prohibits parking from that particular side.
So right now, you can pave 30% of the front yard setback area,
But you could go and do,
but you could do 100% of the side yard without an application?
as long as you're back out of the front setback, yes.
Okay.
Another thing that I noticed happening, and I think I was walking in your neighborhood, and it might have been you or one of your neighbors pointed out to me that some people were paving that grass strip that actually belongs to the town. You know, I think sometimes pavers have extra pavement, and they say, oh, you want us to just do this?
They park on it, they don't want it to be mud. We get that a lot.
Yeah, but it's town property, and it's another one of these things I'd love to educate the public on, that they can't do that, because it's not their property. So,
Okay.
I mean, it's along the way of, we want people who live on a scenic way to realize they live on a scenic way. We'd like people to realize, there's all these things that we would love people to know. So I know it doesn't fall on your lap informing everyone, but it goes on that list of.
I do like the idea of, information that can be available on the town's website. Oftentimes, I think people aren't aware because there's not a single source. If you want to do this, go here. If you want to do that, go somewhere else. Some things are building department, and some things are planning department, some things are public works, right? So, or engineering. So I think it's a good thing to look into.
Let's give it some thought.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much.
Yes, please come.
Quite a seat. Hi.
Hi.
I am Jane Bonus. I live at 3 Columbia Park. And for those of you who are not familiar with Columbia Park, it is a very small dead-end street, the entrance to which is about 100 yards from the Food Mart and the Knights of Columbus building. Every time I drive in, every time I drive out, there it is. Oh, I don't know why I'm getting a little nervous.
We won't bite, we promise.
And honestly, every time it's really, really frustrating and frankly stunning that no attention is being paid to this situation. Clearly, it is a condemned building. It's horrible to look at, but it's also dangerous from a practical standpoint. Kids in the neighborhood, anything, could happen in there. And the store, again, aesthetics aside, but I would love to know the last time that, a health inspector was in there. Honestly, it's kind of a problem. So I really just have one question, and I've wanted to ask this question for years, and here I am, and I know you might not be able to respond to me, but it all comes down to this. How is this better? How is the status quo the ideal solution as opposed to changing it? I would just love that answer. That's really what it comes down to. I speak for, I don't have signatures or anything official. I speak for everyone I know in the neighborhood, and would just ask that you direct some serious attention to our little part of Milton.
So one thing that I'll mention is that those properties, some of those properties are what are considered pre-existing non-conforming uses. And so they fall into a situation of what can you do with them, and which is a little complicated. And it's why I think one of your neighbors, April, has suggested that the board take a look at that and see if we can do something with the zoning, which would help facilitate its redevelopment. So we are game to do that, and obviously it's important to get the neighbors' feedback, and it sounds like the neighbors are interested in having us do this work.
Yes,
Okay.
that's the quick answer.
Okay,
yes,
great.
Very much so. And I know there are lots of technicalities and logistics and all kinds of, those parts. Nothing, can happen in a day. But yes, it is something that we collectively feel very passionately about, and will, if there need to be, more formal steps taken or things signed or whatever needs to happen, we can work that out.
Just again, really for information or educational purposes. So zoning, if we work on zoning and we come with language that we'd like to send to town meeting, to approve. Town meeting approval is required for zoning changes. So we have a schedule, right? We usually have 2 meetings in the year.
Yep.
So one's in October and one's in May.
Yep.
And in order for us to have something on the warrant for the October town meeting, we have to submit our language to the Board of Selectmen in early August.
Okay.
So hopefully folks will be, if we miss that, then it has to be around the 1st of January, I think. Is that right, Bill? For the May town meeting?
1st of January is pretty close.
Okay, so, we'll
Christmas
we'll
to
do.
the holiday.
Right. So we'll endeavor to do our best to have a public process, and to see if we can do this for the fall. But if people feel as if it needs more time, it could shift to the spring.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep, thanks for the information
All right.
and listening.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak at Citizens Speak? All right, seeing none, we will move to old business and East Milton Square proposed Falcone building update and discussion. Mr. Corcoran, have a seat.
Thank you. Ned Corcoran, attorney for the Falcone Companies. I'm joined by Andrew Stebbins and Brooke Shea, who are architects for the proposed development. And also here are Bob Falcone and his sister Jean Falcone Schmidt. I think the last time we were anywhere publicly was a Tuesday evening at the East Congregational Church a couple of months ago. And as a result of that meeting, we sort of took some time out to reconsider where this project may be headed. We think we've listened fairly carefully to the issues and concerns, and we're looking at a new approach to development. We've got some plan view at this point, nothing schematic in terms of building appearance, height, scale, and whatnot, but we can talk through specifically some of the things that we've heard, and then the architects can talk through sort of the thinking that's going on at the moment. And what we'd like to do is request that this board have a joint meeting with the planning board sometime in mid-June, perhaps.
You mean the Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen, I'm sorry, for us to come at you with some more detail, and hopefully you guys collectively can help guide us back through a process that would lead to, we think, a good outcome. So among the things that we heard, massing of the buildings relative to Bassett Street, the notion of parking on a ground level. Bassett Street, the new plan will not have parking that will be at the grade of Bassett. We're looking at the ability to relocate existing tenants within the existing building, taking that existing building down and putting a vertical structured parking in the area of existing parking lot, but not going down. And so building mass at the level of Bassett Street will be actually active and occupied space. There'll be a courtyard presence on Bassett Street. And so, with respect to that and other issues, we're really sort of thinking through new approaches, and just want to give you the benefit of preliminary thinking before we come back out more publicly to hopefully a joint meeting. We'll be before the selectmen with a similar presentation on Tuesday evening, so that each board will have a chance to at least see where our initial thinking is, and then how we would approach to moving forward. One of the approaches, I guess, there are a handful of approaches to permitting, one which we hadn't ever discussed previously, but which might be a significant and benefit, would be whether to consider a 40R zoning district. The town could take advantage of access to grant money relative to impact with the project. Or we could pursue the variance or other more traditional zoning, or obviously one of either of the two 40B approaches, either a friendly 40B or worst case scenario, moving forward with a big 40B. Our hope is to avoid that and to continue to work with the town in the neighborhood on an outcome that works. One other significant change is that we have, this plan would significantly increase the volume of parking that would be available, both to serve the new development and be available to provide parking relief to East Milton in general. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew and Brooke and let them sort of walk through the schematics of where we are and then open it up to the board for questions.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thanks. Andrew Stebbins from the architectural team, just for record, to state the firm name. So yeah, we have sort of new thoughts on the site and diagrammatic form right now. And since they're in diagrammatic form, we took the old previously reviewed scheme and brought it to that same level, just so we can do a little more direct comparison. So as you recall, when we last saw, proposal includes maintaining the existing office building off of Franklin Street with its entrances, and then having a new wood frame over parking as the new constructed L shape. As you can see, Bath Street's on the top and Adams Street's on the bottom. So we had and then we had the Adams Court facade here. So I guess next slide, I can go through a little bit about what was happening on each level, because this was a, thank you. So here's a slide showing elevation, we'll call it elevation 0, which is Bassett Street. So as you recall, we had the wall of the building was on Bassett Street, and it was all parking. We had access points, various access points through the discussions of parking here and over here. The latest one, we had a pedestrian access at this point here, with this all being below grade. Next slide, please. And then at elevation +10, we'll call it, is at the Adams Street and basically at the Franklin Street. So this scheme was, we had to serve the existing entrances and the existing office buildings. We took the opportunity to create a little parking court that had some spill out space for the retail/office, be accessible from the parking court, accessible from Adams Court, and accessible from Adams Street. So that was generally the, and then we had the resident entry off of that parking court. So that was the general way the site worked and how it addressed the 3-4 sides differently. And next slide. So I guess, we took a step back, took a more global look, and we said, well, what's something we could think about differently? And so what we thought about was, well, what would happen if the existing office building went away, and we could find a way to accommodate the developers, existing tenants, perhaps ideally with like a phased project where you move them in and then take the building down. But what could the site look like if that was not there? So not only does it give more footprint to have available, it also frees up the fact that you're not having to accommodate the existing entries there. So, next slide. So here's an overhead view of what we're leaning towards. We're looking at developing further here. So we have a generally in place of the old existing office building, we have a parking structure. This ability to do a precast or a T-type parking structure, which is going to provide more yield at a better price. Honestly, it's a more straightforward construction. So instead of before where we had the parking underneath the building and actually underneath the parking courtyard, the parking is in a sort of vertical fashion here. And then we would do the new building. We call this a wrap. This is a sort of popular sort of condition here where you want to provide parking, but also provide a bit of screening for the parking as well, and also access from the parking into the building. Next slide, please. So this next slide is at elevation 0 again. So this is probably the biggest change from the previous, which is instead of having the parking level facing Bassett Street, we have the opportunity now to activate the Bassett Street level. And so this proposal shows retail/office as determined, and this area here, which actually is next to it, is adjacent to the other retail spaces here. And it also allows us to have a nice courtyard here. Likely it would be like a resident courtyard, so the resident entry would be along here. And then we would have, residential building here. So instead of having the wall, which I think we did the best job we could of sort of breaking down the mass with bringing the building down and making the garage look like a residence. I think this is naturally a more typical or a more viable solution to addressing the massing is just by having these two forms sort of projecting out and not having that wall and having the ability to activate the ground plane. And then behind it, this would be below grade. Next slide, please. So this is at elevation plus 10, which is, once again, at the elevation of Adams Street and the start of Adams Court. So here, very similar to before, we're addressing Adams Street, and we're also activating Adams Court. This proposal actually shows, currently, shows this actually back 10 feet from the right-of-way. Previously, we were back 4 feet, so it gives a full 20 feet of no building area. So I think that's sort of important here now that we can use this as a linkage and activate the length of the facade here, and also allow us, as this grade drops, because we're pretty much at this level here. As this grade drops, it actually allow us to do some little exterior patios to to be able to increase the sort of space that people can occupy. So then around this side, now we've taken Franklin Street, instead of making this forcing to have this courtyard to activate to access the existing office, which we felt was a nice courtyard, but we think that the courtyard's much better off the Bassett Street. And now this becomes the garage access entrance point for people to come in and out. And the yield is we don't have the final numbers, but the yield will be greater than the yield we had before. So we think that's I think that, along with these other things we discussed, start to address many of the sort of comments that we heard as far as things that they wish could be improved by from the last proposal. So this is the direction we're heading, and we hope to come back in front of you in later in June with some further information about some of the data on the number of stories, unit mix, count, and parking numbers, as well as the working on very cognizant of the comments on the massing and the sort of character that was desired as we attended all the meetings. So
it's a project that would be built in 2 phases. Obviously, the building along Adams Court would be constructed first. That's where all of the commercial, retail, and offices would be located, and then the existing office tenants would be moved over once that's built. And then the garage and the balance of the building would be built as a second phase.
Okay, do members have questions? Okay, how about comments?
From a planning standpoint, I think reorienting the building so that you have your density towards the commercial area and a nice open space on Bassett Street really resonates. I think that's a really wise decision. I'm very interested to hear about the yield on the garage, because that seems like a really nice opportunity to solve a lot of problems here. as you think about that, I'd love to understand if there's a connection point between the garage and Adams Court to help, if you're going to provide supply, make sure that it's accessible. But, you know, you're not showing anything about height or number of units or anything, but certainly from a design standpoint, it seems to be more accommodating to the residential portion of East Milton. You know, and then as it relates to the process, if there's an opportunity to look at something like a 40R here, so that instead of counting 4 or 5 units, we're counting all of them towards our supply, I think that would be a really strong planning mechanism for Milton to start considering. So thank you for going back to the table and giving it some more thought.
So what's the board's feeling about working through a process with the project proponent and their team and the Board of Selectmen and working on zoning? Because really, you know, if the direction is to consider whether it's 40R or other zoning, the planning board needs to take a pretty significant leadership role in that, because the zoning would come through us. My feeling is it's something that the community asked for in prior meetings, and
Sorry.
The planning board engagement in the process.
Sorry.
And so my feeling is that, given that, we should be engaged in the process. I think we have skill sets and experience that can help guide the process. Of course, it still will involve a lot of process, a lot of public process in the community. But instead of having it be outside of the public boards, it would be within the public boards leading a process. And I think with the Board of Selectmen, my sense is that they have an interest in this as well. And you'll find that out on Tuesday. But I'd like to get a sense if we can let the applicant know that we have a willingness to do this, and let them tell the Board of Selectmen what they heard here. So,
You know, I'm interested in this. I would be interested to hear back from the neighborhood, because this is a big, significant change to approach. And I want to, you know, mention that I went to a lot of the working group meetings with Rich and many others, and I would love to see them still very involved in the process. I think, I do appreciate, I think a lot of what came out of those meetings, I really feel like a lot of those thoughts were heard, and I think that they're a really good active group that can provide a lot of insight.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's great that the selectmen would be interested, and that the planning board would be interested, and if the neighborhood coalition, working group is happy with the direction, I'm thrilled.
Rich?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat anything that Brian or Denny said, but I agree with both. I mean, this is a great start, and definitely I like the idea of that they've gone back and reoriented some stuff. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see the next steps and see what the 3D, what the dimension looks like, what the density looks like, and everything else. But I agree with Denny. Hopefully, as part of that process, there'll be an opportunity to kind of bring the neighborhood in to hear what the next.
Right, I
those
think
next steps are going to be.
part of, if my sense is if there's favorable feedback at Tuesday's meeting and the joint meeting is scheduled, there would be outreach, and you know, there probably would need to be some dialogue about how to run that joint meeting, you know, which hasn't been really thought through, I think, yet, but it would want to be before that. Yes, Brian?
I think we absolutely must participate in the process with the selectmen, and the neighborhood must be involved. And again, I hope that the entire body, the applicant, the town, the neighborhood can all consider what the proper course is, whether it's 40R variance, whatever the process and whatever the best outcomes for all sides are. I would just want to caution that I don't think that this board should take its eye off the ball on the overlay, because I do think that there's a feeling in East Milton that we want to also make sure that we're tending to future applications and future development here. And if we have a forum in which East Milton is congregating, it seems like we should probably be using that process to also inform the overlay. So that, because I know that there has been comments from the neighborhood in the past that they don't want to have to keep coming to meetings over and over and over again. So it would be nice to use this process efficiently and try to solve for both project-specific as well as future planning.
Was there a date, tentatively was the middle of June, is that right?
I think
Talked with Richard Wells.
they're looking at either Tuesday the 19th, or they were looking at whether the 21st could work. I know that those are two dates that were considered, in part because you're going away for the fourth week of June, so.
We're meeting on the 21st.
There's two of us who will be away that week, so.
We're meeting on the 21st.
Right, so that was something we discussed. That's why we thought the 19th, if people's schedules could accommodate that. But if that didn't work, then we could consider doing it the 21st, and we would still have our portion of our meeting either before or after the joint portion. What are your thoughts about that?
So I'm out of state on the 19th, but
All right, about the 21st?
I'm here.
You're not here on the 21st?
But I might have to move some things around, I guess. I'm trying really hard not to, but we'll see what happens.
All right, so it sounds like
Sounds like it's the 21st.
It sounds like the 21st is better, so maybe you can check with the Board of Selectmen about that. April, do you have,
Yeah, I just wanted to, I sort of am echoing everybody else, but I think you made some very nice improvements that really open up, I think visually will make a very large impact, especially when people see that on paper. But I think the experience on Bassett Street will be incredibly different. I like that you've widened Adams Court, and I hope that that whole sidewalk would be activated with some sort of outdoor space and seating and whatnot, which always seemed to me to be one of the most attractive elements of this project. Could be a very neat commercial corridor there with a different experience than we have available in Milton today. I would very much like to hear from the neighborhood, but I also really think the change in the parking entrance and exit from just a traffic flow perspective is hugely important. We'll have to wait and see when you do some more studying, I guess, of that. But I mean, I think the design is very nice. I would like to hear what the neighbors say. I'm certainly amenable to participating in whatever process the board thinks is appropriate. And I think if we're going to be zoning for a specific project, that this board absolutely should be a party to that, as opposed to having someone else go out and just draft their own zoning and bring it
right,
to
so,
us.
so that's, the thought would be that this would be presented to the community at the joint meeting, rather than a separate meeting. Do folks agree with that approach?
I think joint is probably more effective because it's just going to be,
Right.
There'd be
Lot
too
of
many
meetings.
meetings otherwise, I
yeah,
think, right?
and
Okay.
a lot already.
All right, so, anything else for them?
Just a,
Yes.
well, actually not for them, but just a comment. I do agree with the comment Brian just made, though, on the overlay. My understanding is from the last meetings we had, that would still be
That's right.
something that's still on the, we're moving forward with.
Right.
All right.
And are we going to talk about that next on the agenda?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
Because I wanted to.
yes, yes, it is nice. I just want one last thing. So, schedule-wise, if we did zoning, you're looking for October.
Ideally, we'd like to get to October. That's a lot of work in a short period of time. We know that. We're not ready to present anything more than what you're seeing now until that week of the 19th. That's why we're just sort of coming out, having quick presentations on the schematics and the new thinking that's going on. But we expect to have some pretty good visuals, perhaps a 3D rendering available for that week for people to look at and see, and then we'll engage in the process as appropriate with neighborhood and
I'm sorry.
whichever, boards, whether you break it down into smaller working groups, but looking to get to an October town meeting
My husband doesn't realize it's awesome.
would be, and/or looking for a path to an outcome that will be successful in a reasonable period of time. I think that's more important than, is it October town meeting, is really a path to a successful outcome. We know that whatever is going to go here is going to be a significant change to what is there. And so we're trying to make that significant change as palatable as possible in the context of this process.
Brian?
So to that end, I would encourage the applicant to come on the 19th armed with
Or the 21st?
on the 21st, armed with dates of potential meetings, hopefully around the weeks that we already have meetings, where we know we're going to be in town, and probably giving people enough warning, because
Summer.
people in Milton don't like when we do this in the summer. So the more warning we can give people about when the meetings are going to be, the better.
And I think we need to think through process a little bit. If the first introduction is that meeting on the 21st, and the community will need a little time to digest it, my sense is, we'll have opportunity for everyone to speak who wants to speak at that meeting, but we might want to think about a follow-up opportunity, whether it's submission to the planning department with comments. I hope the presentation could be posted online, following that meeting. Let's set out kind of a schedule, and maybe between now and that meeting, there can be discussions with Bill and Richard and myself, just map out a schedule. Yes, April?
So will you have stories or parking spaces or unit counts for that meeting?
Yes.
Okay, good, because I think that's going to be really important for people to be able to digest.
We'll have unit counts, bedroom counts, parking space counts, stories,
Okay.
step backs, setbacks, all of that we expect to have in a reasonably baked form for people to see and digest.
And then, Bill, on the 40R, people may or may not be familiar with that. You gave us a handout. Is that something that we want to have a conversation about just in general? Ned, are you familiar with you want to participate in sort of an explanation of it? Or Bill, do you want to do an explanation? I'm sure if people are watching and they hear us talk about 40R, what does 40R mean? So if we could just spend a few minutes on that, I think it might be useful. We all have a handout tonight.
40R encourages cities and towns to establish new overlay zoning districts to promote housing production, more generally smart growth development. Chapters 40R and 40S both provide financial incentives to community to adopt these new zoning districts. 40R is a 20% minimum affordable requirement. 40S allows the community to apply to the state for educational costs from that development that are over what you would normally have to pay. So a 40R building should not be a drain on your school budget.
So, Bill, there's funds from the state when you establish the district, right?
There are.
And there's funds when you produce units, right?
There are, and they're on the back page. The zoning incentive payments upon approval of a district, the municipality receives a zoning incentive payment. The amount of the incentive payment is based on the potential number of new housing units. The maximum number of units possible under a 40R overlay minus the total number of units permissible under the previous zoning. They can be the incentive payment is distributed to the community after the issuance of the approval letter by the department, DHCD. Payments range from $10,000 for up to 20 units, $75,000 for 21 to 100 units, and $200,000 for 1 to 200 units. Bonus
I think we're going
payments.
there.
Huh?
I don't think we're going there.
No, and there's two more there, and I'm not going there.
See how many stories there were.
200 to 500, 500 plus, we're not going there. Bonus payments. A community may also receive a bonus payment of $3,000 for each unit of a new building built in the district, which is payable once the building permit has been issued for the housing unit. Educational costs, which is what I just said, but communities are reimbursed for any net cost of educating students living in a new housing in a smart growth district. The reimbursement is equal to the cost of educating the students living in the new housing in a smart growth district, minus the percentage of new revenues from the district that would be otherwise devoted to educational costs, any increase in state educational aid resulting from new students living in the district.
So, I know there are communities that have adopted 40R districts, so maybe part of that, maybe either our next meeting or part of that joint meeting should be some discussion about the 40R, what it might mean financially, what it might mean for our subsidized housing inventory, and where it's been done, sort of case studies. I think there's
Can I make a recommendation? I see you looking at the applicant, and maybe that's just where your head's going.
Yeah, my head's straight.
But my recommendation is that any presentations involving the number 40 come from the town.
Okay. So we
Because-
want to have Bill and Lauren do it?
Bill or Lauren or the selectmen or someone, because I think that if you start having the applicant, in this case, and in any case, present in a 40B, 40R, 40S situation, friendly or otherwise, there's a level of concern that's going to be raised immediately. Whereas if it's a town-based initiative, I think there's a level of confidence that we're going to be doing it from the town's perspective rather than the applicant's. So this is just a presentation issue, but I do think that, and I believe in all of these, friendly 40Bs, 40R, 40S, but I think it should be coming from us, and we should be the ones presenting the data and making sure that the data is correct.
Okay. Agreed. All right, so Bill and Lauren, do you have the time available to do it in the next few weeks?
We'll make it available.
Great.
We've already penciled it in for June 7th.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
There's a lot of good information on the state website too, for anybody that wants to brush up before.
Yeah, it's the Department of Housing and Community Development,
Yeah,
correct?
but if you just go to mass.gov and search
Right.
40R, there's loads of information.
Right, I saw some case studies there, that's why I mentioned that, because there have been, it can be, the financial component can be pretty attractive, and also the fact that if this is a rental development, every single unit will count towards the subsidized housing inventory number, which would be a great thing, if it otherwise works with everything else in terms of
If
scale.
this is the direction you want to go in, we'll create a 40R fact sheet that we can put on our site that will give you links back to DHCD.
One of the things that I think is, if you were going to compare it to zoning like Brian mentioned earlier, just more traditional zoning, you're looking at 10% of the units, which just keeps us treading water in terms, and not making, we're still getting a lot of units, but we're not getting any, we're not really making progress on the affordable component of it. And we're not, and this has a potential financial, how much we have to see, but
I know they listed the number of affordable units that we have in Milton at town meeting. They listed them off. It would be good to know how many affordable units we have in Milton as part of that discussion, because this could potentially double or
Right.
triple, whatever. It would be good to know how this would relate to that number, if we were able to count 100%.
okay, great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
Next, we're going to discuss East Milton Square, the planning process. April has an update for us.
It's not a positive one. ULI originally was telling us they had availability this summer. Now they say they don't have availability. Their committee met and decided they were interested in our project, but they can't fit it in until the end of the calendar year. So my feeling is that that's, too late, because we could make a lot of progress over the next 6 months instead of just waiting. So I don't know if that's going to work for us. And I'm really sorry. I don't know why the left turn.
I agreed that it was too much time until I heard what I just heard in the last meeting, because I wonder if it wouldn't be a good idea to let this process in East Milton inform where we want the overlay district to be, and then also use that to inform a ULI
And an
A
RFP.
larger,
RFP, and then bring it forward for May or even next October, and have a really thorough, thoughtful process for East Milton rather than trying to jam something through for October, which is probably unrealistic.
well, it wasn't even on my radar screen that we would get this done by October.
Right.
But
No, I
But
don't
the,
think.
So then I'm not sure what the rush
that's
is,
a very different point. So I was envisioning that this was going to be sort of a jumping off point for what was going to happen with the Falcone project. But if we're flipping it now, and if this redesign is more amenable to the neighborhood, and that seems like something folks are prepared to move forward with, then maybe the end of the year does make sense.
I mean, I don't see the
Problem-
Falcone project falling into an overlay in any situation.
The only problem with waiting till the end of the year is it'll push it to the fall of 19. Because it won't be able to get to a warrant January.
Right.
So,
But if
Is
you're
that-
another developer in the wings watching what's happening with the Falcone, then, and you know an overlay is coming, then it still takes less time than starting from ground zero.
Yep. And it doesn't mean you can't do whatever you want under 40B anyway. So
Right,
if you're
that's
planning on
still
doing a
there.
40B, they're not going to wait for the overlay regardless. So there's probably no reason to rush the overlay, especially if we weren't intending to try to get it in for this October. If that
Well-
was never the goal, then
yeah, I mean, the question would be how many zoning articles we can work on at one time, because they do take time. And if we know what we have on our plate, we have a couple to consider, 2 overlays already, and then we work on that particular, the Falcone one, which could be an overlay, also could, it could be a PUD, so there's different ways of handling that. But in any case, that's 3 big,
but isn't
projects,
this
if you will,
pushing
pass.
East Milton out?
I'm not even talking East Milton with those 3.
Oh, what were
on
the 3? I'm sorry.
um,
I got your Milton
Milton Village,
the KFC, right.
KFC,
What's
and the
third?
Falcone,
Oh, okay, I didn't, okay,
Project.
third project,
Project.
right, got it.
which would be zoning, because I think that's what we've talked about making sense, right? So, Rich, do you have any thoughts about what that might mean in terms of?
It sounds to me
Schedule.
like what you're saying is there's going to be a lot of projects from now until
For 2 years, for the next
Well,
2 years. That's a lot of projects.
So that, I mean, my thought would be is if we're not going to be able to invest thoughtful time in it now, then I can't see why. I mean, previous meetings, we didn't have any project in front of us, but it sounds like we're about to have a project in front of us. So I don't see ramming an overlay process in if we're not going to be able to spend enough time on it.
MAPC added a lot of credibility to the Milton Village process.
Yeah.
And I think ULI could do the same for East Milton.
Oh, without question.
So,
Well, in any case, I think we're going to be engaging some outside advice. And even if we go the route of ULI, we'll still need a consultant to follow up with that.
Correct.
Because the RFP would be for professional services.
Yep.
There's enough work that it needs to be facilitated.
yep.
That was
Yeah.
my question, was
Okay.
that we had talked about a consultant for East Milton, and I think we can't start too soon on that. I think.
Well, that's the question. If
That's
we
sort
wait
of
until
how I
after
felt.
ULI,
I know.
which can't be
because
to the end
ULI
of the
would
year.
provide all the information, all the
Which is why it would
legwork
have
too.
worked great if they couldn't be available in July like they originally said. But now if we can't get to that first step till November,
Yeah, November is just a long time out. If we were thinking July, it's 4 more months, right? So the question is whether the work on the Falcone would help, quite a bit. I mean, we could think about that process, as you said, Brian, in our own way of collecting information and something a little bit broader.
How are we going to devote, between now and November, realistically, how are we going to devote time to an overlay project in East Milton? If we're working
Right,
on
that's-
Milton
we would-
Village, if we're working on KFC, and we're working on Falcone, the Falcone process would inform, through just public dialogue, what ULI is going to be looking to do for us, and then we could focus in the winter of 2019 on getting the overlay ready to
Right, because the
roll.
thing also is there are property owners in Milton Village who want to redevelop their property. And we know that there's a property that is in very poor condition. And we know with the Falcones that they want to move
Ready to
ahead. So
go.
we know those three, that there are interested parties. There's very specific reasons to move forward, more quickly. So if we had to, if we had to say we can't do them all, which one, might be able to wait a little bit longer because the Falcone would be the most pressing one in East Milton, I would say that probably would work then. As long as the community's on board with that, because they've asked, for us to do that. So I look to you, Rich, because, but it's not you alone.
If we're about to have some joint sessions, and if we are going to be bringing in neighborhoods in to talk, it would be a good idea to
Yeah, let's
let
ask
them know what we're going to
Yeah.
be doing.
Let's
what the
ask
plan
them,
is.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, hearing what was just talked through sounds like a thoughtful plan to me, but I'm not speaking for everybody in the neighborhood.
Good point, and I think
very
asking
big
them
neighborhood.
at that joint meeting would be a great opportunity to gauge the timing priority of that. So let's do that. Lauren, are you still getting feedback on the survey?
Can you put us in the slot?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell them right now.
Okay. All right, so with that, are we ready to move on?
Just a quick question. So when the time comes for that urban planner, or I don't know what we call that, RFP that we put out, will there be money available for that? Can we set money aside through the planning board or through master plan implementation? Or, I know we have a lot of things coming at us.
I guess then, the question, the fiscal year runs, July 1st?
July 1st.
July 1st so if we, the question would be, will we need any consulting services related to the Falcone or the other? We've already have it on Milton Village, so we shouldn't need it there. We may need some with,
I don't know.
we may
Yeah.
not need much, okay? So it depends, on the writing of that zoning. So, do you think we would need some for the Falcone? We're going to ask for a peer review on traffic probably anyway by the
They're gonna ask for
applicant,
it.
right?
Peer review on traffic and engineering.
Okay, so we probably,
Just those two.
so I know that the Master Plan Implementation Committee was supportive of this coming fiscal year, looking at traffic, East Milton Square, and affordable housing issues, whether it requires funds for those, but those are sort of the three next priority issues to address.
Okay.
But
Your question's interesting because it all depends on the type of application. If it's a 40B, you wouldn't be using those funds for that. If it's a 40R,
Doesn't DHCD provide technical
Maybe.
assistance
it's $10,000 to $15,000.
that they provide, or you provide a match?
No, they provide you with $10,000 to $15,000 for peer review, if it's a 40B.
What about if you do a 40R?
I don't
Maybe you can find
I'm
out
gonna have
if
to
there's
find that
anything.
one out, because
Okay.
I know 40B does, I'm not sure the 40R does.
Okay. So.
Oh, no, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
After you're done with this.
I was
It's
just
a
going to
separate
say, I think we could say that, that the planning board's interested in using some of the funds targeted for the master plan implementation towards the East Milton study. And anything that gets spent for that has to come through the planning board and the board of selectmen.
On the 40B, 40R, 40S conversation, would there be any opportunity to draw funds from the Affordable Housing Trust? Are you looking at that?
Can you say that again?
On a 40R, 40S,
Yes.
friendly 40B, would we be able to potentially draw any funds from the Affordable Housing Trust, since it's for the creation of affordable housing?
On a friendly 40B, yes. On the 40R, potentially yes.
So that's another
Yeah.
potential source.
Right, so I know some communities, I've looked into this a little bit, that,
It's going to be hard to build 40 plus units with
agreed. So I know I was looking into this a little bit, and
By the
some
density
communities
matter.
use their CPA funds to help basically buy down unit count. So that's, if you think that you need you need a certain amount of extra units so that you can get the affordability. So, if you have funds, if the town has funds, they can buy down some of those units. So you still get you still get, you don't have to have as much density to get the
Right, I
unit,
understand.
the 20%. I'm not explaining as well
Oh,
as
we
I
got
should.
it, we got
But
it.
in any case, we might be able to use that fund for those funds to do some of this peer
Yeah.
review if it's leading towards additional affordable production.
You have something, Bill?
Yes, I asked Lauren to go to a meeting last night that actually was looking at veterans housing on the South Shore. And 8 communities were there, and of the 8 communities, we were the only one that did not have CPA. The discussion was, I can let Lauren talk to that herself, but it is an interesting dilemma that is a very useful pot of money for different things that we're looking at, for affordable housing, for historic preservation.
Open space?
I mean, one of the buildings that they looked at last night, or that Lauren actually toured last night, was a historic structure that when they went in and looked at it, they came back and said, we just can't make this house work. They wound up taking the house down. You look at the house now, I challenge you to tell me that the house is only 2 or 3 months old. It looks a lot older. It looks like a period house in that neighborhood. So they can take and make the house look historic. It fits the historic character of that neighborhood.
But they could use CPA funds for that,
Yes, because of historic preservation.
even though they took it down?
They came back with the
replicated it?
they replicated the character of that house.
Well, we don't have CPA funds now, so if the Affordable Housing Trust, if there was any other source of funds, I guess it would be worthwhile to understand if, when you do your 40R, research and bring it to us, if there's any kind of creative,
It would be nice to take a little from a lot of pools rather than hit
Yeah.
one fund a lot.
yeah,
Matching donations would be great.
right. And there,
And the applicant could even be asked to participate a little bit.
You could also add to our community compact, affordable housing as a topic, which would create other planning grant opportunities with the state.
We were just denied in our application that we sent in a month
Oh,
and a half
that,
ago.
yeah. That's probably because that's not one of our goals in our community
One, it
compact.
wasn't part of one of our goals, but you're right.
So there's probably some state planning money. Unfortunately, land use planning money in the state dried up a very long time ago. I think there was 40R planning grants when 40R was first adopted, but I don't
think so anymore?
think so
Okay.
anymore, although I haven't been following it closely, so it's definitely worth
They dry
asking.
up quick.
Yeah.
I mean, when they're there, you need to grab them quickly.
There really hasn't been much planning money since the Romney administration.
So the town did submit for a grant for the East Milton study. Did we hear back about that yet? Wasn't that, remember it was due like in a couple of days?
That's the one we did not get.
Oh, that's one we did not get, okay. All right.
On that note, we've tried for a couple of grants. We tried for a parking grant too recently that I worked with Mike Dennehy on. We didn't get that either, but we're trying. I want people to know.
We did get the MAPC and the grant money for the
Yes.
village and the wharf, so that was good. We did get that.
Question.
Yes.
Actually, makes me, the question I was about to ask, that brings up a good point. all the things we're talking about as potential projects for this board to look at for the coming year, do we post those on the planning board's website, the planning site? Because I noticed there's a section that says current projects and then development proposals. Development proposals talks about potential projects, and like, at what point do we put on what we're working on so that like the town knows that we're working on grants, or we've submitted, or that we're working on an overlay in Milton, but it's being pushed out, so that it's actually written down and people see it. Do we do that? Can we do that?
It's a great idea.
Well,
We've been talking about that.
I think having more information on the website is certainly one of the things that we could talk about. I noticed in trying to do a little research that Hingham, for example, posts their recent decisions on their website.
Okay.
So, like it was site plan approval, or site plan approval, special permits, what have you. So you can go and download them and read them, anybody, But so there could be things, once we decide on these major topics or tasks or zoning initiatives, there'll definitely be, need to be information on the website about those, right? Yes, April?
So there's a platform that I mentioned at our last meeting, but I couldn't remember what it was called. It's called Co-Urbanize.
Right.
It was a startup a few years ago. I think it's advanced as a company now. It's a Massachusetts company, but a lot of cities and towns use it, and it does exactly. It supports community engagement, and it creates an online platform, and you can set it up in any way you want. But the basic premise is that any proposal before us has its own page, and everything is updated regularly, and you can set it up or not so that residents can actually submit commentary on projects via the portal, and it's all delivered right to the town staff. But it's a really, really useful tool, so we should maybe think about it. Maybe we could even have them in to give us a presentation. I have no idea how much it costs. I just know that some of my client towns use it, and people have had very positive feedback, but it does exactly what you were kind of itching for, I think, which is tie it all together a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's low maintenance for the town staff, so that you don't need your own full-time IT department to upload documents, which I can imagine is time sensitive, or time consuming, excuse me.
And we've also mentioned this to Mike Dennehy, and I know he has worked with Boston, and Boston does this.
Yes.
So I think we should tap into him as a resource. And
Boston Planning and Development Agency's website and user friendliness and transparency has gotten a lot better in the last couple of years. You can now go on and you can pick a project and you can see where it is in the approval process, and it's very clearly diagrammed and outlined. I don't know what software they use, but that was one of the things that came out of analysis after Mayor Walsh was elected, how to make that agency more transparent, I guess, if you will. Mm-hmm. And they definitely submit comments online there. Mm-hmm. And they have a comment period, and they tell you when that comment period ends, and you have to submit it by those dates. So they have a lot more projects to review than we do. So, but maybe it's the same software.
It might be the same platform.
Yeah. Yes, Brian?
Are there any intern opportunities over the summer for planning? Is that something we should be looking at to look into some of these initiatives for us? I don't know if they're paid or unpaid positions, but is it?
Actually, I was copied on I was sent an email by town moderator Hiss that BU has an initiative. You got that right? Is that something? Did you see that anything in there that we could apply towards any of this?
Did you read that today?
I did. There's potential for that. I haven't had time to dive deep into that this week, but it could be something we can explore.
It's basically having a BU, what's the program? It's their city initiative. I forget the name of I read it really quickly, but it might be an opportunity to bring in a team of graduate students, that would take a look at certain things.
Process or something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, it can assist with a lot of different things in this. It made it seem like you'd have to kind of make a proposal to them what you would like help with, and it would first probably take a little outreach, talk to them about what they think they can do and what we think we would need, and see if there's an alignment.
Very, very similar to what we did during the master plan with Tufts, very similar to what some of the regional groups have done with the Harvard School of Design.
So, I mean, I'm talking more about someone that would come
You're
in
looking for an
and
individual.
Help.
Those are
Help
groups.
with that, yeah.
provide some capacity for Lauren over
Administrative
the
support.
summer, you know, while they're out of school. So
Yep.
They don't-
even a high school student in Milton that's looking for something, I mean, it's just something to think about.
Curry.
Or Curry, just to give Lauren some capacity to do some of these deep dives.
Well, Milton High School requires community service, so.
Maybe
you
we
could
create a
get-
community
you
service
can-
initiative in town.
Yeah, I mean, and they're always looking for good opportunities.
Even if it's just filing, get something off your plate.
Well, research is something,
Interesting. I mean,
that you
we may
can-
just not have thought of it before to put it up at the high school that we can do 20 hours of community service at the town hall or in the planning office. Put those kids to work.
Okay, so we ready to move on to the zoning presentations?
Yes.
All right, so what,
Urbanized, so you can look at it whenever you get a
the
chance.
master plan committee met on Monday, and we reviewed the final draft of the zoning, which is what you were sent on Tuesday. So what I wanted to do is give a presentation as an overview, and then, given, we want to cover some ground, it might be, we can talk about how we want to approach next steps with it, but at least I'll do the overview first, okay?
Oh, he wants our signatures.
Oh, you need our
I asked
signatures?
for signatures on the Mylar of the subdivision.
Sure, sure. We'll do that first.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'll drop them at your house.
Tonight?
Yeah,
I need them because I'm not going to be here tomorrow morning.
I'll drop them off tonight.
All right, we're back.
All right, we're back.
I'll say.
All right, do you have a pointer there, a laser?
I'm gonna give it to you in 1 second.
And it's advance the slides too?
Yep.
Okay, great.
You're aiming at me, not at the screen.
Sorry. We had a meeting, a public meeting, joint meeting, so some things have changed since then. So I'm going to run through the history a little bit and then where we are now with the zoning. So again, the red line is the outline of, at least where it's not cut off on the tail here and a loop here, the current business district. So that's the district we're looking at with this PUD overlay.
That line goes back to Morton Road, which is the
Really?
next street up on right to the middle of Morton.
Yeah, so, it's an interesting district because you have the scale of these brick sort of mill building scale, and then you have the small scale, basically worker housing that was built here. And then, of course, you have the newer scale of 88 Wharf and then of extra space storage. So it's a real mix of scale and construction type. So there, being the brick, this portion is across the river getting into Boston, but this is in Milton, and of course this is in Milton. And then, this is actually obviously highlights some of the issue or the parking and the traffic. So then the High Street, this is getting towards the Elliott Street end of it. These are basically non-conforming because they're multifamily in a commercial district that doesn't allow multifamily. So kind of like what April said about the properties over the site at Brook and Blue Hills Parkway. This zoning could address the nonconformity so that these could become conforming.
If you look at the first white house down the bottom
Here?
is residential. The next building there is commercial. The building behind it is residential. The house here that you see, the prominent one, that's residential.
Well, they're non-conforming too because they don't have frontage. There's all sorts of things that are non-conforming about them.
Right, lot
They're
size.
historic, the Historic Commission identified them as historic in terms of site planning, but not historic in the sense of what's left because they've been altered so much over time. So this, all of this construction, you know, is all
Aren't some
altered
of them,
construction.
aren't some of them historic because of the people who lived there?
This towards the other end.
Or the other end,
Yeah.
okay.
And then, of course, there's some parking along here, which actually serves the businesses on Adams Street. And there's street parking. And then this is at the other end. So this is at the intersection of Canton Ave and Adams. So this was before the planning board, just before I came onto the board. And then this is the funeral home. And some of those houses, I think, that you're referring to, Denny, are right in here. And then this is taken from behind the Verizon building at the parking lot, and this is the town-owned parking lot. This is the former
You're on
lockup.
Adams, the photographer's on Adams Street?
Yes, towards Elliott, right. And then this is the parking for the trolley, and then this parking is associated with the Masonic building. So this character, as we know, is quite a bit varied, and so the zoning has been tailored a bit more to reflect this character now. And one of the obvious advantages of introducing residential in this commercial district is the proximity to the trolley and also to the bike path, which is right here. So this was an interesting, I found this up at the Forbes House Museum by accident. This is 1890, I believe. And I'm going to zoom in on this area right here. But this is all Dorchester through here, and this is the Neponset River here. So this is the area we're looking at right in here. So a blow up of that is, you can see this is the High and Canton right here, and this is Adams through here. And you can see there's a lot of building in this whole area. And then it did transition more to the residential as it still does now, going this way. But what we don't have is this level of density in this area anymore. But we did have it in 1890. And I don't know what this date's from, but this is from the Historic Society website. I think it's a society. But this is that Masonic building, right? So it hasn't changed much. But this side of the street's changed quite a bit on Adams, looking towards Lower Mills. And then another one looks to me like the 50s by looking at the cars. But you can see there was a Citgo where the Citizens Drive up kiosk is. There was a little grocery with liquor here. Again, not much had really changed in there, but obviously from that prior image to this one, this has gotten a lot more developed. So this is the district in plan. Again, this is where Bill said, here's Morton Street. So the train tracks are through this, so I'm not really sure, you know, that things sort of tail through here, what you could really do, but there's probably someone could look at that, I
I
suppose.
think it's air rights that belong to one Elliott.
Which is this?
Yes.
Okay. So,
One Adams,
one Adams, which is here.
yes.
So,
It's actually one Adams and one Elliott. It's on the corner.
it's both?
Yeah.
Okay. So, just quickly to run through how this came out of the master plan, where one of the key recommendations was to create a vision for each commercial district that would encourage housing over retail or over commercial, more variety in the types of housing we could have in town, including smaller, more affordable units, additional retail and dining opportunities, like Milton Village is pretty quiet at night, pocket parks and streetscape improvements. So the MAPC study, working with the Master Plan Implementation Committee, the Planning Department, had a series of meetings. So you can see them here, starting in September, running every month, including this week. And each was well-attended, with community members present, and we invited feedback at every meeting. So there was a joint meeting of the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen October 16th, and there were over 40 community members there. And then there was a community forum at the Council on Aging on December 6th, so there were MAPC facilitated engagement exercises, and then there was the online survey that followed up with those engagement exercises to solicit feedback. That online survey, there were 138, so not as many as you're getting in East Milton. So that's kind of the history of how we got here to where we are now. So this was from the October meeting, where MAPC looked at, we have mixed-use overlay zoning, but it doesn't apply to the areas that we were looking at. That one was designed really to address the 88 Wharf project, and then one was designed, which is what 36 Central and 131 Elliott fall under, which is this one. And this is the one that was the starting point for MAPC to work on for the village. So it's useful to realize that the existing business district zoning, there's no minimum lot size defined. It allows, as of right, 3 stories and 5 stories by special permit, 45 feet height as of right, and 65 feet by special permit. The use of the ground floor is not defined, but as we know, the uses that are allowed in the business district include car repair shops, gas stations, sexually oriented businesses. What else am I forgetting that we said we might want to take out of here?
Drive-throughs.
Drive-throughs. There's no, the FAR maximum is not defined. It would be, what you could build would be determined by other factors. There's a parking requirement of 1 space per every 250 square feet. And of course, there's no inclusionary affordable zoning or affordable housing, because housing is not allowed, except a single family, which are some of the historic homes there. But multifamily is not allowed. And then the Central Ave applies to a site that's 20,000 square feet minimum. And that excludes much of Milton Village now, because the sites are smaller than that. And the one, the PUD for 88 Wharf was a 80,000 square foot minimum site. So we have some properties in the village that people would like to do something with. The only thing they can do under the current zoning is more commercial. So we really wanted to see if we could look at this overlay and unlock some potential for some of those, but without creating incentive to tear down historic resources. So in the response to the community meeting, the engagement exercises, MAPC put this together. So the words that are the largest are the most response. So you can see that people were responding this is the community meeting, this is the online, and this is the combined. So if you see historic and historical jump out the most. So I think people really do value that historic character. And then you'll see even like history, so that's part of the same, really is tied to the historic, the village, the charm, the scale, etc. And the waterfront, it does, people's awareness of this district being on the waterfront, I think is pretty apparent. And then this was a visual preference survey. Again, the community meeting, the online, and the combined. I know these are a little hard to see, so I'll have another slide, but there were images that showed building character, signage, streetscape improvements, etc. So see, these were the ones that were the most liked that came out of that. So this kind of brick sidewalk with planters and sidewalk seating. Now we have an issue because our sidewalks currently aren't that wide. So that's something that you'll see in the zoning. Also, this kind of space between the buildings. So kind of more usable public space. You can see here, public space project. This kind of storefront and signage and seating, and then this kind of character of the architecture picking up on the brick buildings. So one of the analyses that MAPC did, and this is for the February meeting, was to say, okay, what about an existing building that everybody knows and understands? What does that look like? So that lot size for, this is the Masonic building, but what's the address?
60 Adams.
60 Adams. So this is Wharf and this is Adams. That's a 15,900 square foot site with 25,928 square feet of area. It's 3 stories on Adams Street, 4 stories at the rear. The lot coverage on this is 54%. And the FAR, so the floor area ratio, which basically takes your gross floor area and divide it by your lot area, and that gets you your floor area ratio. And it's 1.63. So the reason we did this was we were looking at the numbers that were being proposed for the new zoning to see how it would compare to something that already exists in the neighborhood or in the district. And then he also took a look at a site that one might consider underutilized, because this had been that Gulf station, and now it's just a drive-through. So for ATM for Citizens.
It's also the parking for Citizens Bank.
Parking for Citizens Bank. Okay. So what in some of his analysis, he looked at, we were talking about this one being an example of what might come into play at some point, but then we became aware that this property, the owners are interested in doing something with. And they've talked with Bill. So what does this zoning in its current state do? It allows multifamily above first floor commercial on a lot size of 3,500 square feet or more. It requires, it's just an option. The underlying zoning remains, so there's no requirement to change anything. But if a property owner wanted to apply under this zoning, sorry, turn my mic off. Got it back? Okay. If a property owner wanted to apply under this, it's a rigorous special permit process, which doesn't exist today under the business zoning that's there. This separately, we wanted to suggest that we look at the underlying business zoning and think about removing certain uses that are allowed now, which includes drive-through. So anything that's there is already would be grandfathered in. It wouldn't change anything that's there, but in the future, these things could be removed. And that would be drive-through, used car lots, car dealerships, gas stations, vehicle repair shops, and sexually oriented businesses. I mentioned these were the two, this is one of the properties that the owners are interested in redeveloping. This is one that in the future may, because it might be viewed as underutilized. You can see the topographic difference between Adams Street and High Street, which is important in terms of how you might be able to park it, because you can be parking in the back and be underground and have commercial towards the front. It also means you can be taller on Adams Street and shorter on High Street.
That's used to be a grocery store that burned like in the early 60s.
So that was the one that was in that photo.
Yeah.
So under this zoning, under this overlay, the height is not changed unless we get to a bonus, which I'll get to. So the height limit remains what it is today under the current business zoning, which is 3 stories or 45 feet.
So if you look at the bottom picture and you see the building with the brick face, that was built in 1799, but it has been redone throughout the inside of the building. So try to find one of those beams inside there. The only place you might find a beam is probably in the basement. Nothing on the inside says 1800s. The building to the left is a replacement building, and it came in like the 50s or 60s. So it's not, it doesn't have a historic piece either.
So those are 65, 85 Adams Street, and this one's 59 Adams Street above. So the other thing that this would do is incorporate design standards, and the standards would be something that the planning board could waive at its discretion, but it's a baseline minimum of what would have to be done. There's no design standards now. It's just a zoning requirement now. So there are incentives in the form of bonus area and height for historic preservation, for public realm and Milton Landing improvements, and for affordable housing. So the incentives only apply to properties with frontage on Adams Street. So no bonus allowed on the properties that their frontage is on High Street. So that's the way we dealt with the fact that there's a big difference in scale between the two streets, which you can see here. I mean, this is the one-story Citizens. Who knows what will happen with banking and storefronts along the way as more and more is online. And this is High Street, where there are historic, but there are non-historic properties as well. And there's a big parking lot in front of this building on High Street. And then there are, so if people have opportunity on those properties down the road, they could take advantage of the zoning, but not the bonus. Again, the incentives are only granted at the discretion of the planning board. That incentive is to allow an additional story and some additional square footage, or FAR. The baseline requires 10% of the residential units to be affordable, but the bonus would allow, if more affordable units were created, then the bonus would be allowed. And the other big thing is some of these sites, the really challenge to redeveloping them is parking and how many parking spaces are required in the current zoning. So we had a lot of discussion about this, and allowing parking to be off-site and leased instead of requiring it to be on-site and owned is something that we really feel like could unlock some of these sites, these small sites. So there's all of that is in the language and in the commentary that Josh provided, so we could go through that more specifically, but that's the summary of what we're trying to do. There is a traffic study underway. It's been underway for a month. We're expecting some results pretty soon.
We are.
Some recommendations. And then also what came out of this discussion was discussions with a historic commission and the possibility of pursuing a historic district here. There's a whole state process for that, and the first step is a study committee, which was appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And so the Historic Commission asked the Master Plan Implementation Committee for support of that, which we did send along our support. So we understand the Board of Selectmen is going to appoint this study committee, which is the first step in looking at a historic district. What the historic district does, which is different than the demolition delay that we have, is it would impose restrictions and an approval process for changes to historic properties. So that, I believe, that was the last one, right? No, sorry, this was the last one. So knowing that parking was going to be a question and an issue, we asked MAPC to do a parking count summary. So this shows where there's parking available, both public and private, so that if we could start to think about if you were going to try and park one of these small properties, where might you do it? There's also been discussion about whether the town could provide parking so that it could be district parking. We also talked about whether our commercial parking spaces, where we currently have no overnight parking, whether we could have permit parking for just this district for the residents who would get a permit if they live in this mixed-use district, so that they could park on Adams Street. Elliott Street, we talked about being already parked a lot because of the, like Abbey Park, Steel and Rye, but not so on Adams Street right now. So this would be, this is just to give a snapshot of the inventory. There'd be a little more work to do to flush out the parking. And it might be that just the applicants would have to come back with a proposal of how they would solve it. But on the municipal side, there might be some I think some further study with the wharf area, if whether any additional district shared parking could be there. So that's,
So I just had a question on parking. Is 13, is that the Verizon building?
yes,
So there's, it's their parking.
it's private, yeah.
It's private, and then 13 is the 88 Wharf, that's their.
It's
own-
private too, right?
Private, yeah. So it's just all theirs.
This is what's just the parking availability, because if you said, okay, Verizon, you know, they don't use that parking lot at night. So if you think about what's being done in a lot of places that are parking, you have shared parking. So if you have a different hours of use, or like weekends, you're not using Verizon, you know, so maybe if you have a restaurant that goes in, you can have a, you know, an arrangement like Lower Mills, some of those restaurants have an arrangement with Meeting House Bank or with CVS that they can park, you know, after 5 and on the weekends for their customers. So it's a way to get better utilization of all your parking.
So there might be
Assets.
potential, but there might not. You just
Correct.
have to do.
Yeah.
I think we have what we have here is just it's a look down from, trying to count parking spaces from an ortho. So are the spaces really there? Maybe, maybe not. Some of the other issues are, I disagree, and I know DPW disagrees with, you know, parking on Adams Street. But at the same time, we have the lot on Wharf Street that sits there all night. If we had an overnight parking system, town of Brookline, there's no overnight parking unless you have a sticker. No sticker, you have to go find one of the lots. You either pay at the lot or you have a different sticker for the lot. So certain streets, no parking. We have the potential that we could do the same thing. Overnight parking would go to a specific lot. And it's a money-making resource for that particular lot, to upkeep that lot. Is things that we can look at. As Cheryl said, you know, certain of these businesses do not operate at night, but maybe we find a way to work something out with them, or their neighbors work something out with them on a new development.
It's like part of the permitting, as I read, and correct me if I misread it, Bill, but when the restaurant at 88 Wharf was permitted, they were required to lease spaces from the MBTA
Yep.
to use at
In the
night.
38 spaces there.
Some of these
Yep.
to use at night and on the weekends, and then they went back and amended that because they didn't need them. They didn't want to have to rent them. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about, is that you have an underutilized lot at certain hours when you need it for another user. And then somebody asked us at our meeting on Monday, what about if you have a snow emergency? Well, the way some communities handle that is you have a place that's designated to take your car to in a snow emergency. It could be a school, for example. It could be down at the wharf. It could, you know, it would be a designated place if it were an on-street parking spot at night that was resident. So maybe we should go through April's and then we can talk about next steps with both of them. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. I don't want it to get too late for, since it's 9.
So mine is a lot shorter.
Well, this was a year of work,
And
so.
less detailed. Yes. And I should, full disclosure, had some very serious technical deficiencies today, so hopefully this will look right. So a couple of people talked about it earlier. I want to talk about the potential to do an overlay district at the corner of Blue Hills Parkway and Brook Road. So what I would be looking at is this corner right here. That one lot is shaded, but it's really this whole corner. And this is an aerial view of what it looks like today. So right here is the church. It would not include the church. These are a couple of pictures you can't really see so well in this slide, but these are existing conditions. So if anyone's wondering why would I propose to do something here, I think you can see. This here is the corner of Thatcher and Brook Road, and the building, the building in the rear right there is the former Knights of Columbus, and this is a single-family home, which is a closer up here. These properties have been essentially boarded up and gated off with these Jersey barriers for maybe 5 years. And I think you heard from Jane Bonus in particular, who I've heard from quite a bit about this, and whose opinion I share, that this is just insufficient for any neighbor to have to live next to. This is the Food Mart, which is directly adjacent to the Knights of Columbus, which you can't see. This is a single family. I took this picture in the winter. I took the other two pictures today. So there's no greening here, but you can see that it's just a small parking lot. There's a dispute about whether it belongs to the Knights of Columbus or the Food Mart, but it's very small parking lot. And then this gated off, very large property right here. This white building in the background is a multifamily structure. So this corner is currently a residency zoning district, which requires a minimum of 7,500 square feet, and it allows single-family lots only. What we've seen from the Knights of Columbus site is that that zone is just simply not attractive to warrant a redevelopment, because if this owner thought he could make money, and he is a developer, if he thought he could make money on single-family houses, he would have done it. There would have been no reason to be sitting on this property for 5 years. He had attempted to gain a variance in 2013 to create 6 condominium units in the Knights of Columbus and rehab the single-family home out front, and it was declined. And so the property is set. I have spoken with him, and he said he's very interested in pursuing a project. He'd very much like to pursue some variant of the project that he had proposed originally, but he's unwilling to go through the variance process again. And he said if there's a zoning solution, he would very much like to advance something there. The site is too small to support a planned unit development strategy because it doesn't have enough square footage on its own, which is why I've proposed this alternative, which would be an overlay. There's 7 parcels that I would propose be part of the overlay. They include 3 existing multifamily buildings that are non-conforming. So like Cheryl mentioned earlier, I think on High Street, you would try to make those conforming. That could be a real benefit here, is that those 3 existing buildings could be made conforming. There's the Knights of Columbus, and which hopefully we could unlock some sort of redevelopment there of some kind that the neighborhood felt was acceptable. Then there's also S&E Auto and the Food Mart. And those 2 properties are okay. I mean, I wouldn't say they're highest and best use, but they're 2 very small parcels. They're currently non-conforming commercial uses. I spoke with the owner. There's a single owner of both parcels. They have 5 years remaining on their leases with both of those businesses and no immediate redevelopment plans or sale plans of any kind, but they're very interested in hearing what we put forward, and they do not object, although I confirmed with them today that I would make sure that I wasn't overselling this as though they had any immediate plans to redevelop the parcels. But it seems to me that both of those sites could potentially be joined to create a very nice mixed-use building of some kind. So what I would like to propose is that through this overlay district, we allow the parcels that currently host commercial activity today to have a continued commercial use, a limited commercial use moving forward. So the goals are really to provide or promote a timely redevelopment of the Knights of Columbus property, allow the creation of new housing on the Knights of Columbus property, which really sits in the middle of a residential area, which is very lovely, and I should disclose that it is my neighborhood. I live 2 blocks from here. It's a very nice neighborhood with, I think, a really one not so nice corner. And so I think if we could make adjustments to this corner, the neighborhood would be much happier. Another goal would be enable mixed-use redevelopment of the Food Mart and S&E at some future time, should they wish to redevelop it. Should they not wish to redevelop it, those buildings could stay as they are as non-conforming commercial properties. Allow for the continuation of neighborhood-scale commercial uses on those sites, and I do think there is a benefit of continuing those uses or some other type of retail use. Another benefit here could be to improve access to these parcels, because right now S&E Auto sits on the corner of Blue Hills Parkway and Brook Road, and they have 2 curb cuts, one from Blue Hills Parkway and one from Brook Road. The tenant, S&E Auto, blocks off the Brook Road, blocks off the Parkway entrance because it's so dangerous. People were just flying through the parking lot trying to avoid the light. And the gentleman who manages the business just said, forget it. He parks his truck there. So, I mean, I think there could be an improvement there under a redevelopment scheme. The Food Mart has another access point off Brook Road, which is incredibly dangerous. And the Knights of Columbus would share that same access, although there's opportunities to create some sort of access from the other side street, which is either Thatcher or Laurel. We could also, through this zoning article, require some on-site parking requirements, which are currently woefully insufficient. And there's only a handful of, we could create on-site parking. Right now, there's only a handful of on-street parking and not enough on-site parking, which I think is a real opportunity. So my recommended next steps were to get your approval, if you're willing, to draft a zoning proposal right away for discussion and consideration, bring it to a public hearing, which I would very much like to see held in the neighborhood, potentially at the Tucker School, which is right close, so that people could have easy access to get to the meeting, potentially even next month. Consider the feedback and refine the zoning if it's warranted, assuming that what I'm predicting is true, and people will be happy to hear that something is under consideration. But if we learn that there is not interest in rezoning, then fine. But if we can get neighborhood support, we could adjust as needed, easily submit an article to the selectmen in August and get it on the warrant in October. I think the town, the schedule could accommodate it. Because we're only talking about 7 parcels. So that's it.
Can you go back to the aerial? Or the GIS, whichever one you had. The GIS would actually be more helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So the one parcel I did not mention is this one. I forgot. This is 3 Laurel. It is an existing single family. This right here is also a single family, and then everything else along Laurel is a multi-family unit already. This parcel is potentially not inhabited and may at some point become the property of the town, but that remains to be seen. There is a sliver of property here that belongs to 3 Laurel. And from what I understand, from information I gained today from someone else in town, I didn't get it firsthand, is that the owner of the Knights of Columbus is trying to talk to these folks to see if he can either acquire this whole parcel or some other part of it to create an access point here, which would be far safer than this, because this intersection right here gets pretty congested.
And what is the church? Do you know the name of it? Or the denomination of it or anything?
Do you know which? Oh, it's a Methodist church, yes.
Thank you.
And it's a lovely building. If you haven't seen it, it's really pretty.
So I guess my question would be, are you including number 3?
Yes.
Okay. So that seems like a no-brainer to me to include number 3.
This is, the reason why I picked it is because this is a straight line here.
Right.
So the thing is, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
So all I was going to say is I wonder about putting an overlay under the church just for long-term planning considerations with, zoning supposed to last 50 years and it being a potential parcel in the future. Is it something that we should roll in? So it's just a question I would ask us to consider in case something happens with that building. It's being a Methodist church versus the Catholic church, which has been disposing of properties, maybe that's less of a concern, but certainly with, again, zoning sort of being a 50 to 100 year thinking process, should we be looking to encompass that parcel, which is not a residential use? Those are my 2. Oh, and then I did have one more question. You said the commercial piece that you were talking about was thinking about allowing commercial only on the lots that have commercial today.
Yes.
I would just want to think about the ramifications of that and look at the depths of those parcels and how they relate to setbacks, in the sense that if we did do an overlay here with the possibility of someone unifying all of these parcels, could you end up with a better project if you could put commercial slightly back into where it's whatever it is, 148? Because that's a really narrow site. So if you're limited to just those 2 parcels, I'm not sure if those 2 businesses aren't there anymore, what modern business can really fit on those 2 small parcels, especially with setbacks.
So what I was thinking is that if these 2 sites were merged, it's still a very tight site, but that you could do maybe
So you
something
go off
around the
the hill.
corner and do the parking back here. And if you had 3 stories, with 2 stories of residential, it would probably pencil.
Yeah, it's
But-
probably works. I'm just, again, I'm going with that 50-year thinking that, you know, if someone were to unify the sites, could you end up with a pretty nice gateway project right there?
Oh, I think this could be lovely, even if these folks unified, but I
Right.
don't see that happening.
Right.
And I think that that's exactly the type of question that we should be thinking about. The one pushback I'll say is that the condition of this right here is so poor and people are so frustrated that I'm fearful that if we try to overreach or create something that lends itself to a larger district, that it might delay the process and then further delay the redevelopment of that site.
Totally understand. I just want to make sure we're thinking about, thinking outside the context of who owns what today, because that can all change really fast. And make sure that we're giving the opportunity of this site, making sure we're giving the opportunity of the site the recognition it deserves as a gateway parcel for Milton.
Yeah.
I think, as I said before, I think that this work that was done a few years back made this
Yes.
intersection much worse.
I agree.
So if
Totally
we could,
agree.
and you know, if you look at that, I mean, in size, it's like, it's a fairly decent amount of land that could be better utilized. So if, you know, if we could work with the town, it's town-owned property, right?
Yeah.
We could work with the town
That-
on what we would do with that, and, you know, maybe that can become part of the private property, if that provided some benefit, if it helped with access or parking or something.
I mean, I'm working on some things in other municipalities and in other states where you could envision a situation where the town swapped this for this, and now you end up with a pocket park here to break up the neighborhood. So there could be really some pretty neat planning initiatives that could happen here. Or it could just be one project that we're talking about, but I think it would be nice to have the opportunity to do something pretty cool here if all of the parties manage to line themselves up.
April, can you go back to your timeline sheet
Yeah.
slide? All right, so, well, first of all, Rich and Denny, you supportive of the concept of exploring this further?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so then the next question is our timeline and how it fits in. Because June is where we heard now that we want to have a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. And we all know that we rescheduled our meetings because of various travel plans that everyone has. So, and considering June starts next week, right? So I just want to see what we think about. And one other thing, April, I think that I've been corrected on is that the hearing would, the actual hearing would come after we file with the Board of Selectmen. So it would be a public meeting,
Okay.
right, to solicit feedback.
Yep.
So,
But at the public meeting, we have something to show them.
Yeah.
That's,
yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I think is important, because I think people need something to respond to. Because if we're just, this presentation, I don't know if that would be that helpful.
Yeah.
And we don't have a development proposal. I mean, we have a guy who says he wants to do something, which is good, but I would really like to hear what the neighborhood would like to see, rather than, I just think we could put some zoning together based on what we think could be possible and see what the neighbors say about it. And who knows, it could evolve into something totally
Yeah,
different.
I mean, if the neighbors want something totally different, maybe you put some good overlay zoning in, and that gives the existing owner some value to actually sell out into the development market.
Right.
So one thing, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it.
I was going to say, suggest is that if you said, if you did a quick analysis and said, okay, 6 units on, and if you said we wanted these to provide a little different housing stock, so maybe they're 1,000 square feet or 1,200 square feet or even whatever, you could say, 1,200 square feet times 6 would give you X square footage divided by your land. What does that FAR give you? How many parking space, if it's 6 spaces at, let's say 300 a space, how much land area does that take up? So what does that tell you about your coverage? Just do a little bit, because that sort of test analysis, I think, will be useful for people to understand what does that really mean, how big a building on that site, how much open space on that site. Because then once you have that, then it's crafting the actual language that pulls it together, right?
Yep.
So I'm kind of thinking if you could have that, even more like, either diagrams or numbers for a meeting that, and the same thing you have here with, photos showing it, that's probably a starting point for the community feedback, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't have capacity to do diagrams, but
Well, if you give me some information, I can help you with diagrams.
okay.
All right.
So do we can we do June is a good question.
So let's, now, if you don't mind, let's just talk about what the schedule of how we're going to fit all of it in, or what we can fit in. If we said we needed to get things done in June, and if we think it's reasonable to think that we could do 2 zoning public meetings the same night, like, could we do the village and this one in the same night?
Probably.
And schedule them such that people who are interested in one site, know what time it is they're coming,
If you did like 6 and 8,
right? And then Falcone separate, because that's going to,
or 7 and 9, but
that way we could try and get 2 meetings in. And if Falcone's already going to be 21st, when we already have a meeting scheduled, so we could pick, a time that would work before then, I would think, because it's, so.
So you mean on the 21st, do Falcone and
Only Falcone and whatever other business we have.
Okay.
But have another meeting that's the Milton Village, and what do we want to call this one?
I was just calling it a multifamily overlay district, but
Okay, so maybe, can we call it Brook Road Overlay District? Or, I know Brook, I don't know, whatever, some, so we don't have to keep saying the streets.
yeah, that's fine.
All right, so we know we have a meeting on the 7th, so, and we have one on the 21st. Should we try for the week of the 11th? Is that, you're away the whole week?
me too.
And
I'm
you're away
away
the whole
Monday,
week?
Tuesday, and
Everybody's-
Wednesday in DC.
Which
Okay.
day is this?
June 11th?
I'm in New York all week.
All right, so then what about the 18th?
We have a master plan meeting that night.
Oh, why isn't that in my calendar?
And you're gone, right?
Okay, yeah.
She's not here. She needs to be here for this meeting.
Yeah, I think she does. All right, I just want to get this other meeting in here so I don't lose track of it. All right, so what does that leave? I'm not here the last week of June.
Change that.
No, we're having both.
Traveling 17 days that way.
Yeah, I'm not there that week either.
So the week of the 4th, the night of the 4th?
You're going to get a lot of community complaints if you meet that week.
July 4th?
No, I'm talking about June 4th.
Oh,
Oh,
that's next week.
Oh, is it?
yeah.
Aren't we meeting on the 7th?
No, that's not next week, is it?
It's 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah, we're already meeting on the 7th. Should we just try to do it then?
You want to do both?
2 weeks from tonight.
Do you think we'll have anything else? Bill and Lauren?
We have a discussion of 40R and discussion of 8 Parkwood Drive.
Sorry, what's the Parkwood Drive one?
Just what we
telling
just
them.
asked about.
Yeah.
Okay.
we have to
Oh, right, okay.
put the status
So,
of-
I guess we could do it the 7th and use both of our meetings in June just really to get the public input on the zoning.
What time would it be?
I guess 7.
All right.
I mean, we could, if we want to try and do both, we could try and do a little earlier. I mean, 6, can people make it a little earlier?
7 works. I'm going to be in New York City until noon, so I'll be here
Yeah, okay.
after that.
You know, I like the idea of having it at the Tucker School for your neighborhood, and it might make sense to have the wharf meeting somewhere near the wharf. I don't know where that would be, though.
The only problem
They
with,
have a space at the 88 Wharf that I think that might be able to be used, no?
the only problem with those two locations.
Yacht club.
Yacht Club is too small, don't you think?
Let us in.
It's as big as the 88 Wharf's
Is it?
meeting room.
Okay.
The only problem with those, any location really, other than a few, is that they can't be televised.
That's true, too.
Oh, Tucker, the school can't?
I don't think Tucker has a studio, do they?
Tucker School, no, Tucker can't. Oh, that's too bad, because it would be great to have a televised.
Well,
Can you film from Tucker?
Why couldn't they bring a camera?
Well, we don't have a console like this set up. We might be able to do
Remote, I mean,
yeah, we run.
film.
I'll relay that to them. that's what you're
They
interested in.
can record it, they can't send it live.
Can't be live.
Yeah, but I think that's fine, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's,
Yeah.
we definitely,
It doesn't need to be live.
just whether or not it be live, that's much more of a.
Yeah, no, we
Right,
don't need it
okay.
live. I
We
don't
wouldn't
think
need it
we should.
live.
Record it.
Yeah,
Right,
that
if
would
it
be
could be
good.
recorded, then at least there would be a record of it and people could watch it, right?
Yeah.
All right, I do think those can be hard to do at the same day, though, if you want to do them in the neighborhood.
But I think doing it in the neighborhood is important. I do. I think you'll have a much better
We're going to be able to get them done.
involvement.
The other question is, does the whole board need to be there if for a community meeting? I mean, ideally, it would be nice, but is it more important to have a
that's
representative board so that the community can get informed and then bring it back to the planning board to advise them? Because I think trying to mesh the 5 schedules around this table is proving to be difficult outside of Thursdays.
Okay, so,
Well, we don't really have anything on our agenda for the 7th.
well,
I think it's fine. There seemed to be a concern about location, which
Oh.
I mean, if you're going to do it at Tucker, then the village is just further away. But we've had a couple of meetings already on the village. They just have been on prior versions of the zoning,
always
so.
been here, haven't they?
They have been, yeah, because they've been master plan meetings.
Right.
So so what we could do is maybe make the village the 7th here, but April's, you're the one that has a harder time with other dates, right?
I'm traveling 17 days. I'm
So the
sorry.
7th is the only day that you can do it?
I
What-
can do the 6th, I think.
That's what I have down
Twice.
twice, right? We're holding,
The only other 2 days, literally, that I have open on a weeknight are the 6th or the 14th.
It's, Cheryl, it's about the money.
Huh?
No. Master plan ones. That's why we're doing it twice.
right, to get the use of the funds done, right?
Yes.
For the fiscal year
Okay.
ends.
It's already escaped up here.
Jumping in into me, I got
How critical is the location at Tucker? Because if we could do it here, that resolves the 7th.
I mean, it's not critical. I just feel like as long as I've been on the board, I've been asking to have a meeting at Tucker, and no one's ever obliged yet. And now there's a project that's like across the street, and I just think it would be.
We did have one of our master plan forums at Tucker, I will say, because we did go out into various places for those.
I mean,
What about the church? Big.
I don't think it's about the location.
No,
I
at this
think
point, it's just we're trying to do 2 different.
Because Milton Village, no matter what, would be too far away for that location.
You think Tucker's too far from Milton Village?
Isn't that what we were just hearing?
We can't just do them both at Tucker?
Do them both at Tucker? There's no reason we can't do them both at Tucker.
Okay. So who needs to check in to see if we can have a planning board meeting at Tucker? Bill, Lauren?
Yes,
See if it's what room they have available on the 7th?
I will ask.
And then, because these are public meetings and not hearings, we don't have to have the 2-week advertising period, right? But we do want to let people know about them, about that meeting, what's going to be on the agenda, right?
Yes, I think we should ask Milton Cable to run run one of their banner things.
And have,
And ask the newspaper, but
shouldn't we do
put something together.
public notice to the abutters and like the people who live on High Street? And I mean, if it's a public meeting,
But there's no application.
so,
putting forward.
yeah, so we'll have to do our advertised hearings later in the process, right? But we have an email list, we have our outreach methods, right? So we could actually let people know, to Rich's point earlier, about what we're working on. Once we find out about Falcone, if that meeting's going to be the 21st, once that's confirmed, we can let people know about all 3 initiatives, and then that our meetings on the 7th and the 21st are going to be dedicated to those 3 initiatives, and that people are welcome to attend and provide feedback throughout those meetings. I see a nod, so you think that's a good idea?
And the neighborhood can help get the word out too.
Yeah. So the neighborhood associations could help get the word out. And then at the village, there isn't necessarily a neighborhood association, but we know who Outreach is because we've already reached out to them on other for other meetings, right? So as soon as you find out about the location, as soon as we hear back about the joint meeting, then we can get that word out, right?
Yes.
And then maybe on the town website, is there a place, you know,
Yeah, we can do
you've
news
been doing that, right?
Right.
And then lastly, Facebook, Milton Neighbors has a huge audience, I guess you'd say, membership or what have you. And Milton Scene, they will put out like public notice on it, and the Milton Times.
So I know there's been some discussion about the historic commission and a historic district, or this area, within the overlay area, right? So wouldn't that be in place before or at the same time that you put forward the overlay article? So wouldn't the articles go in either at the same time or historic district first and then overlay?
Not necessarily, because the districts are, that actually is a pretty lengthy process. The Historic Commission came and spoke to us about that, and they said that in the past, because it restricts what people can do with property, property owners have to agree, you know, to their property being entered into that district. So it's a bit more time consuming, because on the one hand, while one person says it'll protect the property, someone could view it as restricting what they could do with their property, like you're taking their rights from them. So it's a process that takes time, and there's a state requirements around that process. And I don't have them all at the tip of my tongue, but I know the Historic Commission could explain it, and they've been advocating to the Board of Selectmen to do the study committee, because that's the first step, because you have to do that outreach. So it could take a year or 2 years even, I think is what we were told, to do it. And then the concern would be that some of these properties that we know people want to do something with, like with the Swift Hat House property, and with the ones that Bill mentioned on Adams Street, you know, if the zoning doesn't give them any tools for a couple of years, I don't know, would they go a different route? We'll see. But we've already invested the time and monies into that. But it's worth asking the Historic Commission and the Board of Selectmen how long a time period they think that would be.
Because here's one of the things that I wonder about is on High Street, you have some houses that are historic, you have some houses that aren't historic. So if you put historic protection on one of these little houses, but the house on either side of it is not defined as historic, then what could happen is the house on the property on either side of them could be built up to 3 or 4 stories, and they're kind of...
They can do it now.
They can do it now, but
with no controls whatsoever. You're actually getting more controls through the overlay than you are under the existing zoning.
But in effect, this is incentivizing revitalization, which is fine. But I can understand why someone who lives in one of these little houses feels like they're, getting built up around, in effect. If you say, well, now this is historic, it can't be built up, then they're really stuck. And
yeah, the one thing is that we've talked about at the committee level is that we didn't, at the master plan and with MAPC, is that we think we would be up to a legal challenge if we tried to downzone what somebody could do with the property that they own right now. So in other words, you tell somebody, under your current zoning, you can build 3 stories and 45 feet, and then now I'm going to tell you that you can only build 1 story because the building next to you is only 1 story. And they said, well, I bought that property based on what I thought, what the zoning is. You can't downzone me because there's case law against, you can't, we
Okay.
can't do that. We would be legally challenged, yeah. It'd be a taking. So the town would be accused of doing a taking and have to compensate that property owner for that taking.
Okay, so that's not going to happen if it becomes a historic, if
The historic district,
it's not
We,
gonna-
we have the demo delay right now. So there is a 2-year delay on anything that's going to happen unless the Historic Commission agrees to it. Every house except for the office building on
hi?
High Street has to go through that.
That
The-
one
we
building in
did
the back
not-
doesn't, right?
We did not implement bonus on High Street because of that height factor.
So
There's a-
every house on High Street would have to go through the demolition delay?
They have to go through, if they want to take the house down, which is why we want to put in we want to put in this overlay. It allows them to rebuild their house within design standards. They don't get the bonus as if I was on High Street. High Street, there's a 15-foot difference between Adams Street and High Street. So if you're going to build, you want your frontage on Adams Street so that you can take advantage of the 15 feet. If you go back to the pictures that we had up there, and I said the house with the brick front, if you count the floors, there's 3 full floors and an attic floor. So you could potentially have 4 floors. It is only 45 feet tall. Now, if you're in one of those small houses in the back, they've always seen that roof. That 4-story building was there before that little house was there. So they've always seen that building. It's not an imposition to them. And anything I build cannot be bigger than what that building is right now.
May I clarify something about the local historic district process? My conversation with the Historic Commission is, Cheryl explained this a bit, but it is a process that you do opt into. So you can create a local historic district that would be, for example, just my property, but it doesn't constrain anything that April wants to do with her property next door.
So they have to opt into it?
They have to opt into it. So even if it is passed, even if we get the local historic district commission and properties do begin to opt into becoming a local historic district, it only affects that property.
There are houses in Cohasset built in 1989 that are in a historic district. They're on the state register of historic buildings. Our animal shelter is on the state register of historic places. And anybody who's visited it,
Well, the state register is different than a historic district.
you're right.
And
But
this is where, we had a lot of conversation, and we had the Historic Commission into Master Plan Committee meetings around this because there was concerns that the neighbors had. And we really, and MAPC worked on the zoning, that's why it was changed quite a bit over the process, is to not reduce what people could do on High Street, but allow them to do mixed use, to get the non-conformings to be conforming, and really then allow for more opportunity on Adams Street. People said, well, why don't you just take High Street out of it? And then we said, well, then it's not addressing some of the properties that might benefit from it, by being able to be made conforming, or somebody who wants to have like those smaller ones at the Elliott Street side of High, where there are mixed uses there, but they don't conform for a bunch of other reasons. The small sites are hard to do if they don't meet zoning, because you can't. You'd have to go a variance process, and we've seen that doesn't always work, so then what do they do with the property? So they're sitting there kind of falling apart in some cases, the Swift Hat's definitely falling apart.
So one can, imagine assemblage from Adams Street to High, right? or on High Street, combining and going up.
They can still only go the 3 stories on high.
Right, it's limited
Yeah.
to 3.
You still
but they could
can't go higher on,
but-
even if you have frontage on Adams, you can't go higher than that on high. And the topography makes that happen because it's buried, that first floor is kind of buried into the hill. Yeah. Am I explaining something wrong,
After
Elaine?
you're done,
Oh, okay.
there's something that I have to read into the record.
Okay, and so that, what gives you 4 stories here only gives you 3
3
stories
stories, so
here
it climbs.
because of that
Right.
change in topography. So you wouldn't get a 4-story building on high,
Right.
under this, it wouldn't be
You
allowed.
could imagine like a mixed use on Adams that could combine with the property on
Yeah,
High.
but you can't take up the whole site with the whole building. Right now, we have a coverage and an FAR, so you can't, let's just say, for example, if this was your site, and this was High, and this was Adams, you couldn't build a building that filled all of that up. You have a limitation, I think right now 60% is in that, is that right? Something like that, and there's a,
But your height is measured from Adams Street, not from High. So you're gonna take 15 feet off,
but, so you have to have,
45-foot max.
yeah.
So it may be 30 feet.
And the other
And
thing
30
to
feet's allowed
remember,
now.
it's all at the discretion of the planning board. So if somebody came in with something that was enveloping one of these small historic houses, the planning board at their discretion could say, no, it's out of scale and doesn't work. And we would be within our right to say no, and we couldn't be challenged on that because it's at our discretion. Well, we could be. We'd probably survive, yeah, you're right, technically we could be challenged. All right, Lauren?
Forgive me, this is delayed. I was supposed to read this into the record when April was giving her presentation, but this is a letter from Joseph Madugno of 248 Blue Hills Parkway and Annetta McSweeney of 250 Blue Hills Parkway. I respectfully ask that you read the following comments into the record of tonight's planning board meeting. My neighbor and I are unable to attend and participate in the citizen speak portion of the meeting. As property owners and longtime residents of Blue Hills Parkway and as members of the Friends of the Blue Hills Parkway Neighborhood Group, we would like the planning board to know that we support April Lamro's concept of rezoning the corner of Brook Road and Blue Hills Parkway. We feel hers is an effort worth pursuing at this time. The corner, bordered by Laurel Road, Brook Road, and the Parkway, has long needed attention and improvements. You can be assured that many neighbors have informally expressed a desire to see this area thoughtfully improved and would be supportive of the planning board taking up the issue. We believe April's proposals for the various parcels have merit, and we fully support acceptance of these as a way to begin a process that will open up neighborhood input and discussions of the possibility of a suitable, in-scale, and well-planned redevelopment of this corner of our neighborhood. Thank you.
So, thank you. And as far as, we'll have more opportunity to discuss the various concerns and, potential or negative or positive impact of these going forward. But in light of time, we have on the agenda rules and regs review, but the last meeting we said that because we spent more time talking about that, we were talking more about zoning today, which we did. So if we want to have some conversation or if we want to defer this to another meeting, gauge the interest of the board. Yes?
I've read through them. I have a lot of comments, and I don't know if anyone else has read through them, but I would suggest that we try to share our comments with each other, maybe in emails through Bill and Lauren, or maybe have Bill and Lauren try to consolidate them or something.
Not together.
What's that?
I said through me, not together.
Right, exactly. So anyway, we can. I just don't think I don't think we're gonna be able to do it service in 20 minutes tonight.
And I don't think we're going to be able to do it in the next 2 meetings.
I agree with that as well.
Yes.
Something that important to note: there is a public hearing required of this, but there's no requirement for town meeting approval. So this can be done whenever, as long as we do the public hearing.
Okay. There are some, I did start to do a little bit of research on what some other towns are doing, so just to kind of get another layer of information, and I'm not done with that, so I would need more time. So if we work on the zoning for the next 2 meetings, And it doesn't matter so much in the summer, I think, if we're working on rules and regs when other people are on vacation and doing other things, because they're not likely to be as concerned about that as they are in zoning. So if you all agree, maybe we'll tackle that in July. And if there's anything in the meantime that people are working on, like if with trees or what have you, we can work it in. Just let me know if you want to work it into the
Oh, I do
schedule.
have an update
Yeah.
on the temporary sign bylaw.
Okay. Can we do that? Do we build that into this agenda or no? Do we have to put it into the next?
Put zoning down?
Do we have zoning? We have zoning presentations, but
Bless you.
all right. So Lauren, let's put zoning.
You used to just
Update-
leave it on there.
Let's just leave it on there as we're working through it. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So
My-
bring it up
my
next time?
oversight on working on the agenda with them.
Okay.
Next time, okay?
Yep.
Okay.
I committed to getting everybody.
Good catch.
Whoa.
You missed my miraculous
Didn't
catch.
even notice.
I missed my comic.
I told everybody I'd have a draft to you by a date in June. I think 6/21. For the revolving fund. So whatever that date is, I was hoping to be on that meeting. I know we may already
Okay.
have two other
So
things.
let's
but-
make a note of that, Lauren. So
6/21.
on the 7th, we're going to have the sign update. And on the 21st, we'll have are we calling it a revolving fund?
Traffic roll for now.
And maybe, can we do something where we kind of do a schedule, like to people's points about kind of a look ahead a little bit, like what the planning board's working on over the next 3 months, like on the website or something? So like people know we're going to be working on our rules and regs, so if they're interested, they'll check the agendas in the summer. We're going to be working on zoning. That will be, some for the fall, some for the spring, just kind of, here's a planning board update. Doesn't have to be very specific, but at least then people can look for the agendas if they're interested in a topic.
No, I'm sorry. So to that point, 6/7 is signs. And what are the zoning projects we're doing that night?
The village and,
And okay, that's April and Cheryl night.
Right.
Okay. And then
21 is
6/21 is Falcone. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then
and Falcone is also 41R. I mean, the 21st.
Oh, we're supposed to sign?
40R, I should say.
Okay. Thank
so
you.
then we'll go back in July and August to the second and fourth Thursday, right? Okay.
Does it matter what color the sign is?
No, hold on. I'll make the explanation.
Oh,
and
okay.
One
the-
second.
You already approved this. You asked that it go to town council. Town council made one request, and that was down on the very bottom where it says, performance guarantee. And the original one said, in accordance with section 512. He asked me to take and put in the rules and regulations of the planning board of Milton, Massachusetts.
Great.
All right, so sign
That's the
them.
only change.
Do we need
No,
blue?
there is 3 blue copies over by Cheryl.
Oh,
All I need is that.
Oh, so
that's just
can-
for us.
Recycle. But there were changes, and he said he would have taken either yours or the other. And we left yours there. You had more detail,
Oh yeah.
said, whatever.
Okay. He was okay with no detail.
Is this your first decision?
I don't think I'm allowed
No,
to.
I don't think this one,
Yeah,
because it
so
came
no.
in before.
Not
still
quite.
undecided.
Yeah.
There are 3 copies of Mylars that need to be
Congratulations.
signed by April, Cheryl, and Dan. These are the 1065.
Motion to adjourn then?
Do we have to do this under?
No. you
Okay.
can-
Okay, so this
Second. Is there a second?
Second.
Brian.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.